Marsha, welcome back to Unbroken. It's always a good conversation when I get together with you. And I understand today we're going to talk about energy healing. And you have a lot of background and experience in that. So let's just start with you kind of sharing with everyone kind of what you've done with that and your background and your studies and all of that in terms of being an energy healer.
Sure. I'll give myself an introduction. I'm Marsha Walters, and I really got into energy healing the way most energy healers, I think, get into it by being very, very ill. Um, there was a time in my life when I was extremely stressed. I have a background in engineering. I have a bachelor's and a PhD in electrical engineering, and I also have a master's in transpersonal psychology and a master's in physics. But when I was working as an engineer, I was working 70, 80 hours a week. At that time, I was raising a daughter on my own and experiencing migraine headaches, irritable bowel, uh, in a highly stressful environment. And I knew that I had to do something different because it wasn't working. So what I did to change my life was I gave my life completely to Source. I I told my highest power that whatever I was doing it my way, and it wasn't working out for me very well. And interestingly enough, that very next morning, the whole world was different for me. And I saw things differently. The light was brighter, and everything changed. And I quit my engineering job and joined a spiritual community out in Montana. And in that community, I learned to heal myself, first of all, change my diet. Of course, you can imagine, it was a pot of coffee a day and stopping at McDonald's and added to to my health conditions tremendously. And so I completely changed my life. And it I was so astounded that within months I was so much better that I decided I wanted to learn to be an energy healer. And so that term energy healer is a very broad
Yeah.
term. It includes thousands of modalities, but what makes it unique is that being connected to Source, one of the first things that happens is we all of us who go through this spiritual transformation begin to see things differently and deeper, and our intuitive abilities really start to increase. So I could begin to see auras and see through different dimensions and understand things from a subconscious level that a lot of people didn't understand. So with that comes a lot of understanding and a lot of perception of the world at a deeper level. And so that aspect is probably one that is common to energy healers. And if it isn't, then it you need to find another energy healer. But and the first thing always that I tell people is I am not healing you. I am connecting to Source. Between Source and you will heal yourself. So what I am is a facilitator or like a catalyst in a chemical reaction. And the special things that I have uh, is a co-creative effort because all the study that I've ever done, all the different modalities that I've ever studied, or something that Source can use. If Source wants you to, for instance, put a color yellow over an organ, and you've never ever seen the color yellow, then you'd have a hard time communicating with Source about it. So the more we learn and the more we do at our level, the better off we are. And I've studied many modalities: theta healing, matrix energetics, foot zone, foot reflexology, herbs. I love the herbs and the nature, working with the nature spirits. And I have worked with many healers, Grigori Grabovoi, who works primarily with frequencies. And so basically, the way I do my energy healing, quote unquote, is first of all to connect to source and then listen to what source has to say in various ways, and then communicate on behalf of the client that I'm working with. The other very important aspect of that is learning to communicate to source, to the universe. The universe really speaks in a very specific way, and it is a positive language. The universe doesn't understand don't. You want to say things in a positive way. Um, and and that is something else that I have become very, very good at. Um, so between the connecting to source, learning how to speak to source, and getting input um, that others might not ordinarily get, those are the things that really contribute to my spiritual healing the most.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot that you said there that really resonated with me. One is I'm also and have been a healer, right? And you're absolutely right. We don't heal people. We are a facilitator of healing. And I think everybody has it within them to heal themselves, whether that be physically or emotionally or spiritually. But sometimes, especially with people that are very, very traumatized, it's that relationship itself that's also healing because it's love, and love heals, right?
Right, absolutely.
So that's, I mean, I love the way that you have framed that. And then, when you were saying that you were eating McDonald's and you were, drinking a pot of coffee, I think that's actually really important. So I just want to highlight that because we always have this ability to connect with source, our higher self, whatever we want to call that energy, right? But it can get sort of blocked or, messy if we are toxic. So if we're not eating the right food, if we're not sleeping enough, if we're not so we have to take care of this vessel, right? So that we can be open enough and clean enough to have that connection. So I think that's a really important point. And Penny Kelly has said the same thing to me. She healed herself from rheumatoid arthritis by changing her diet and the way that she was living. And so I think that's super important. Everything is part of the healing. But so one thing I want to ask you about is, to me, there's kind of two ways to live our lives, right? Like we can just be in our lives and do the things we do. We wake up, we brush our teeth, we do our work, whatever, we go to sleep. And there's a second way of living our lives, which makes it a whole different life, which is to do what I just said, but to be always in connection, right? In communication. So just wanted your thoughts on that.
Yeah, Max, you're right. That's a very important point because a lot of people live life on automatic pilot.
Yeah.
It's Jesus would say you're in dead man's bones because we're not connected to ourselves, much less to source. We have to, a lot of people will. I know a lot of people that keep the TV on all day long or the radio on all day long, anything to keep from knowing ourselves. And knowing ourselves, I guess it was Plato or Socrates once, is man, know thyself. And it seems to be one of the scariest things for people because people deep down somehow feel like they may be broken or unworthy. And so it's a scary thing at first to really take stock of who we are, what kind of person we are, and actually to begin to monitor ourselves and our behavior.
Yeah.
And it's scary at first, but what I find is the more we do that, the more we find our own inner beauty.
Yeah.
That is what we find, and it's as we go into the subconscious realm, which is as we bring this subconscious to the conscious and connect to source, that is what helps us to live our lives in a more meaningful way. And so it is that delving into the subconscious and releasing it, doing the shadow work, that is so important and so threatening and intimidating in some ways, because but to remember that there is no judgment, and that's something that we're not used to. We're used to being, at least I'm not used to it. I'm brought up with in a very critical family where I didn't feel like I ever did anything right, and so you live with that mindset that you think somebody's criticizing you all the time. And then we create God in our image, and you look at what religion has done. Oh, you're a sinner, you're a miserable sinner, and focus so much on the sin aspect that it is difficult for us to actually believe how beautiful that we really are.
Yeah. And actually in our society, in all a myriad of ways, that's what's pumped out to us, right? That we're evil, we're wrong, we're bad, we're unworthy. And I think it's actually, this is a whole different conversation that we won't go into here, but that's deliberate because we actually are so powerful. And if we are clean and, physically, and you brought it up, emotionally too, like if we work on our shadow, we clear our traumas, we're a clear channel and we're so powerful. And so, something that I've always been doing energy work without really knowing what it was, right?
Right.
So for example, I've learned to put my intention out. So I will speak it and I will be in a state of, quiet. If the TV and the radio are on, you can't hear that inner voice. Like you have to stop. You just have to sit still to hear it, right? So I put out my intent, and just for example, a long time ago, my intent was to heal myself. So you ask for this, and if you ask, you shall receive, right? It's an absolute, it's physics. It happens. You ask, you receive. But the trick is, how are you receiving, right?
Right.
And so we misinterpret. So I misinterpreted for a while because I was like, my intent is to heal. And then it was like all this pain and all these memories and all this dark stuff. And in retrospect, I look back and I realized, well, I was getting what I asked for, wasn't I?
Right.
Because my intent was to heal. And what is healing but taking out all that stuff that's keeping us down, keeping us toxic, keeping us restricted and small in our consciousness. So I wanted to just make that point because when you work that way, you ask for things and you will always get what you want, but it might be uncomfortable as you get what you want, right?
Right. Absolutely. And asking you shall receive. It's on the receiving end. Sometimes it comes to us and we reject it. Sometimes it comes to us and we don't recognize it because we've stopped looking. We've stopped being connected. But I find that, and two, when you say the broader the question, the harder it is to answer. And this is one of the things about source is to be more specific about things when you ask. And source loves to answer questions. I ask questions, always, always. And so much of that comes up from the unconscious or subconscious, if you will. And then you have to deal with it when it becomes conscious. And that's one of the beautiful things about theta healing. Let's talk about theta healing a little bit.
Okay.
And theta is called theta because we take on the theta mindset.
So before you go on, Marsha, just define for people what you're talking. You're talking about brain waves and frequencies. So just for someone who doesn't know what theta is, just take a step back and just say what you mean by that.
Okay. There are different stated frequencies that we're in most of the time. For instance, usually when we're running around, we're not too stressed. We're in beta. And when we're asleep, we get in a deep sleep, we get into delta. And then alpha becomes a slight meditative state. And then theta is more like a deep meditative state.
Okay.
And then there's also gamma, which is a really interesting state because it's gamma is where anything is possible. I think gamma is where if you've ever been like in an auto accident or something, and time slows down, and you actually become aware of everything that's going on, and this happens a lot during trauma. You
Yes.
get into that gamma state. So uh, theta then is really a meditative state, and it's not hard to get into it once you develop habit. And so I get into theta state immediately when I do a session. And so and people may not know the difference, but it's definitely a quiet state. When we're one of the reasons we're so deeply imprinted and programmed, if you will, when we're young children, is because we're in theta usually from the time we're born until about 7 years old. We are in theta. So
Yep.
we are deeply, deeply imprinted during that time with what happens in our lifetimes. And sometimes on a healing, very often, uh, uh, healing a problem, an issue you may have with your body today actually started back when you were in the womb. Because when you're in the womb, then you're also experiencing everything your mother experiences. So, and you don't know the difference. So what she's experiencing then imprints you as well. And then, of course, we can also go back to past lives, and that some of the things definitely carry through with us. Some of the deepest patterns, as we get into these patterns, come from many lifetimes ago.
Yeah.
And so, what we do in theta healing is we purposefully go back and into the mind and reprogram um, some of the belief systems that are wrong. Like most people, and the sun's coming out where I'm at.
Yeah. I see
Uh,
you looking quite angelic at the moment.
yeah, okay. Uh, uh, well, this I don't know if you can see me at all. But anyway, so for instance, there's so many common misbeliefs that many of us have,
Right.
that we're unworthy,
Yes.
or that we're unlovable, or that God doesn't love us. For one, we're such a sinner that how could God love us? This was when I struggled with when I was a teenager and realized that I was gay. Is because people said God doesn't love you because you're gay, and I had a real struggle with that, because my concept of God was all loving. So I never understood how this sin, quote unquote, was worse than all the others, but that's another subject. But anyway, when we get into theta, we purposefully remove these programs and bring in newer ones, with the specific wording that the universe will accept. I am worthy versus I am not unworthy, is one that's very common, and and sometimes it comes in layers. And so, because so many people have such deep wounding that sometimes you you have to repeat in a different circumstance in a different way to the subconscious. So it becomes quite an art form to track, if you will, to go back to the exact belief system that may be contributing to an illness. Because as energy healers will tell you, doctors just look at you like you're a physical body. Traditionally, I mean, traditionally they don't even tell you that it matters what you eat. But we look at the whole of you, and so each and every one of us actually has four lower bodies: a mental body, an emotional body, a spiritual body, and a physical body. And so all these different bodies have to be healed, or sometimes just one of the bodies can heal, and it will trickle over to the other one. You can very often heal a belief, and the physical body will change.
Yeah.
And in the work of if I'm also a physicist, and if you Look, for instance, at the work of Grigori Grabovoi. He says, and I believe this is true, that every 10 to the minus 17 seconds, and that's not very long, we're recreated. We're like pulsing, recreating. So we can recreate ourselves that fast. But what happens is we go into the same old patterns. And it's like what Jesus says, you don't put new wine into old wineskin. And yeah, I love Jesus. I'm keep quoting him, but
He was a pretty great guy.
he's a pretty great healer. You know, you look at healing, you look to Jesus. I don't care what your religious beliefs are. And but we have that. It's physically happening that we're recreating constantly. And so if we shift the belief, we shift the pattern, we get to the root of it. Unlike Western medicine, we're not energy healers don't just try to cover up things. We try to get to the cause, the core, and the record and the effect of what is happening. So we look at it on all these different levels and look at it through all of time and space and time, because we have existed on different planets in different times, even though there is now only the eternal moment. In order for us to comprehend this, we have this sense of what is called time. So we transcend that as well during a healing session.
That's so fascinating. And I've heard of the fact that like when a human being is being conceived, when the egg and the sperm meet, that it disappears from the material world and then it comes back, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so it just in general, what that says to me is, and I know this from quantum physics, which I don't have a degree in, but I used to read because I found it fascinating, is we really are energy. That's what every piece of matter around us is, vibrating energy. And it looks solid, but it isn't. And that's why when scientists have gone down to find the smallest bit of matter, they can't. It's empty space, right? Because it's energy. So we are energetic beings, and that is what allopathic medicine completely misses. It's that Newtonian idea that everything is mechanistic and our body is a machine, and it's really not. And so I recently I saw a video, and it was fascinating to me. I believe it was in China, though I'm not sure, and they were showing they trained doctors there to work on people energetically, and they had machinery so they could see, and it was showing this woman with a tumor, and you could see the tumor on the machine, whatever it was, the ultrasound, and then the doctors were focusing their energy on the tumor, on breaking it down and releasing it. You could see on the screen the tumor shrinking, and it took about 10 minutes, right? And so I've always had, because there's things that we know from before we came here. And so I have many moments like that where there's something I know and I can't quite remember. But I've always looked at surgery as so barbaric. Like it has always seemed totally barbaric to me. Why would you cut the flesh? And see, you don't need to, right? So you can heal these things on the energy body, and they translate into the physical body. So I think that's a really good point, and I'm fascinated by that. And most of us just feel like we're flesh and we're matter, and that's it. And so we've been trained to ignore that entire aspect of who we are, which takes away so much, right?
Yeah, let me speak to that a little bit. Greg Braden, who is someone that I have studied and really respects, he showed that video at all of his workshops. He would show that video, and what they were saying, those doctors, was already healed, already healed, already healed. And so it is seeing yourself in that healed condition. It is perceiving yourself and being grateful in advance. That is really part of the secret, if you will, to healing, is you see yourself differently. You see yourself as already healed. So
Right.
you shift your perception, and then your body will shift with it.
Yeah. Yeah, I've
Yeah.
heard it. I love him too. And I've heard that said as almost like you, so it's visualization, right? And I do that too. So I have visualized myself how I want to be: peaceful, loving, compassionate, balanced. And, in times where I didn't feel any of those things. And it's almost like I'm creating that version of me, and then I'm
Hmm.
drawing it to me, and then and then that's that's the new version that I am. And
Right.
in terms of Greg Braden, I read in one of his books, he told the story of visiting a native tribe. I think it was in Arizona, and it was very dry. There had been a drought for a long time. And he went with this young man to some mesa, and he waited while the young man had to do a rain dance to call the rain. And so he saw him with his eyes closed, and he was moving in a certain way and doing something with his feet in the dust. And then afterwards, Greg says, "Oh, so did you ask for rain?" And the guy says, "Oh, no, 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 no. I didn't ask for anything. I was in the rain. I was
Right.
feeling the rain. I was squishing
Right.
my feet in the mud," right? So
Hmm.
that's what you're saying, right? You don't,
Absolutely.
because what I understand today is if I ask for something, that means I'm lacking it. So the
Right.
universe is registering you're lacking and reflecting back more lack. So you
Right.
have to say you are healed. You do have, the rain is here. And sure enough, in that story, within an hour, it started pouring down rain.
Right. That's a very, very important is how you speak to the universe. And like when you say, I want something, if you use the word want, that already implies a lack. And so you get more lack.
Yep.
If you say, I am sick, anytime you use the words I am, it's a prayer. If you say, I am sick, then you are saying, God in me is sick. And so, no, God in me is not sick. It's not that you deny the condition of the body, but you use softer language, or you can say, I don't, I don't feel as well. But then when you claim the illness, and this gets into the quantum principle of morphic fields. And this is why when someone has a diagnosis or is in a particular group of people, then they essentially get into the energy. Let's talk about cancer. If somebody gets a diagnosis of cancer, then and they accept that, then they're accepting the energy of all the people who have ever been diagnosed with it, all the papers, all the doctors' opinions. All that energy then becomes near them. So as a healer, very often a lot of times we have to separate people from those huge morphic fields. And so when it comes to cancer, well, I have a growth that is inexplainable or abnormal. And then a lot of what we do is take just normalize the body, just normalize it, because our bodies normally have been designed to be, to live many, many years and to be very, very healthy. And it's all these different things in the world, either physical toxic things or toxic emotions or misbeliefs, that all of those, and diet, of course, is one of the biggest things, add to the condition. We have a very sick society today. People are clamoring to hospitals and doctors, and a lot of people don't realize or aren't open to alternative methods. And by that, the herbs, the plants are there. The Creator has put the plants there for us to also help heal all these conditions. I love studying the herbs and going through my fields and seeing what kind of presents are there for me that I can pick and use. Um,
And they want to help us.
yes, they do.
I spent some time in the Peruvian Amazon living there with a tribe and talking with the shamans, and they would walk me through the jungle and point out this herb or this thing is for this. And I asked at one point, I said, "Well, how did you know what these different things do?" And he said, he just looked at me kind of puzzled. He said, "Well, the plants told me, you
Yeah.
know." And so he gave me an understanding that plants want to be in relationship with us. When we ingest them, they get to experience our consciousness. And so
Right.
it's something that they desire, and everything is interdependent, right? So that definitely is something that exists. And, when I was there, and they use some plants that they put together to make something called ayahuasca, which they consider a healing brew. And so I did that. And there was a woman there who had come with a terminal brain tumor diagnosis. The doctors had told her, there's nothing we can do. And, it's just a matter of time. And she shared her vision after the ceremony, where she felt like all these little men were excising the tumor. And when she went back to the States, she was in email contact for a while. She had gone back to the doctor and they had done a scan. And they said, "Did you have surgery somewhere?" And she said, "No." They said, "Well, we see like these perfect little incisions and we can't explain it, but your tumor is gone." Right.
Yeah.
So I would consider that an energy healing, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. And I've seen that time and time again. In healing sessions, I've had people who were scheduled for heart ablations or open heart surgery, and then they go for their pre-op test, and the doctor says, "I don't know what's happened. Keep doing it," and they send them home.
Wow.
And that and that's part of doing what we call psychic surgery, which I do as well. And and so there's so many different ways, to reach. Primarily, we're reaching the unconscious, and the unconscious can be a tricky thing. Getting into theta um, is only one way, and experiencing joy is another one. Really experiencing um, just the joy of life. There have been people who watched comedy reruns when comedies actually used to be funny, like I Love Lucy and different things, and or that heal just by experiencing joy and revitalizing yourself with the understanding that this life is a gift, and to just um, dig into it, and we tend to focus on our problems, and I'm not saying to ignore them, but but to begin to look at the things that are really beautiful, the things that are really working, and because where you put your attention, that's where your energy goes. And so if you put your attention on a miserable situation, then you're actually making that bigger.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of a fine line, because we don't want to ignore what's happening around us, but at the same time, we don't want to give it energy. And so I look at it like like a GPS. When you get in your car and you want to go, I just came back from Florida. You want to go to Florida, you put your destination there, right? But if you don't put where you are, where you start from, how are you ever going to get there? You know? So it's a method of, okay, I'm not going to say I've got cancer, because first of all, eh, I don't always believe allopathic doctors.
Right.
Now, people make mistakes, right? And they're always busy, and everybody's busy, and things get mixed up, and we know all the mistakes that have happened. But let's say I don't feel quite right in this part of my body, okay? And so what I want to do is be normal, healthy, and vital. So I start there, a softer place. I'm not really putting my energy in the declaration of, "Oh my God, I've got this death sentence," right? Which is hard to do. If you listen to doctors, oh, we need to get you in here right away and get you on chemo and get you on radiation, and we all doctors. Some of them are amazing people. I'm not saying they're not, but each and every one of us has to take personal responsibility for ourselves and our bodies. So I tell people too, listen to what I say. If it doesn't resonate with you as right for you, then tell me, and we'll do something different, because there's all kinds of ways that we can do this. Or just listening to other people is a good thing, but we always want to come back to our heart center and say, is this right for me? Is this right according to my highest power? And we want to do that from the heart space. And that's I wouldn't be complete without talking about the heart space a little bit more, because that's where we want to operate from. And we've been taught, and most of us operate from these big brains, right? With all the logic and all the research and all of this. And it's good. I'm not saying don't do that, but don't depend solely on that, because the heart and the brain have got to work in synchronicity together. And so what many people do, and we've been trained, we've been indoctrinated to ignore the heart. Oh, you can't follow your heart, that's ridiculous. That's just being emotional. This is what is so important, is the heart, because this is where our direct connection to the
Yeah.
creator is in the heart, in the secret chamber of the heart, or heart of hearts. And so we learn, one of the first things I do, I try to stay there, but it's difficult. Somebody tries to run you off the road, you're going to pop out of your heart space and get mad. It's like, what are you doing? What's the matter with you? but the other thing we have to watch is where are we in relationship to our body? And when I say that, I mean, where's the majority of our consciousness residing? Is it up here, or is it here? Or sometimes one of the first things I have to do as a healer is to get people back in their body. People who have been severely traumatized, as you well know, have a tendency to leave the body, and they can stay gone for a long, long time, because it becomes very uncomfortable for people who, I had past life memories of being tortured in World War II, being caught, and you leave your body. It's painful, right? And so we have to, first of all, feel safe being in our bodies, and feeling safe is another big thing for people to heal. And so feeling safe to be in the body is a first step for some people, especially if they've been very traumatized.
Yeah, no, that's very true. I want to comment on something you said a minute ago. Like when you gave the example of there's somebody, they're diagnosed with some kind of cancer or something. It seems to me like today, in today's world, it's almost like disease and sickness has become the norm. But in nature, in truth, balance and health is the norm, right? So if we have some kind of diagnosis of whatever, that's a symptom that we're out of whack, that we're out of balance, that this natural state of perfection and health is a little twisted for whatever reason. So it's not actually a bad thing to be told you have whatever. It's information so that you can go, oh, wait, I'm a little off center here. I'm a little whatever. So what do I need to do to restore myself back to that state of birthright health that we all have, right? So,
Right.
so
Right.
even with illness, it's not, but we've been trained incorrectly, right? But I now look at these things as symptoms to tell me, okay, get yourself back on track. You veered off a little bit, right? Well, I think that's super important. And in terms of the heart, when I think of a developing fetus, that's the first thing that exists is the heart. Then the brain comes later. And the mind and the brain is super important, but it really can't work properly unless it's connected to the heart. And we said that earlier. It's the way of living your life. Like if you live your life connected, so if your mind is connected to your heart, then you're going to use that mind that much more efficiently and better. And you're going to see things, and you're going to know, and it's that inner voice. And it is that connection. I think the connection to our soul is through the heart, right? Which is why people who are psychopaths, that is disconnected, that's cut off, And if you look at people who are psychopaths, they can torture and rape and kill and feel nothing. It's so unnatural. They can do this. That's evil, right? So evil can thrive and exist when the heart isn't online. So that's how important that connection is.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you for that insight.
Yeah.
It
So
is true. Go
yeah.
ahead.
No, you go ahead.
I forgot what I was going to say now.
So let me ask you some questions then in terms of energy healing. So when people come to you, do you scan, like, can you see with your inner eye? Like, do you scan them energetically, and can you actually see anything there?
Right. Yeah. And that's something I learned to do much better by a course I took in theta healing, intuitive anatomy. I actually, with permission, of course, because as a healer, I can see everything, but but in a sense, I don't see everything at once. You know, it's like I liken it to looking at a carousel, like in the library, and I ask for the priorities to be shown to me unless I'm looking for something very specific. But what I do is actually enter the body with my vision, and I can scan and see the whole thing.
So in theory, all of us could do that with our own bodies, right?
Yeah.
We could just scan ourselves, and that intuition is so important. And we ignore it. We're trained to ignore it, but when it comes in, I've heard so many stories. Like somebody said, I was walking alone at night, and this voice told me, don't turn down that street, and I ignored it, and then boom, something terrible happened, right? So it's almost like energetically we're always being guided. We always have the opportunity to address anything that gets awry. Like it's a really powerful thing when we get used to operating that way. And here's a little thing I want to see what you think about. So I've noticed, like if I have a conflict with someone, right? If there's something, I've noticed that if I talk to that person's soul telepathically, and I do receive a response. It's kind of astonishing. And then I can work an issue out on that, I guess, dimension maybe is the right word. And then whenever I do talk to the person in physical realm, something seems to have shifted. So what is that?
No, absolutely, absolutely. I do it. I do it a lot. Um, uh, I just do it a little bit differently. I say my higher power to their higher power. I connect to my higher power, and have my higher power have a conversation with them, and then and I don't always know exactly what goes on. You know, a lot goes on in the dream state as well. But absolutely, you can see it as have my soul talk to them, your higher self talk to them, and it works things out. Yeah, and uh, let me speak to something else that you said, talking about intuition and hearing that voice. And so many times we do hear that voice, but we'll only hear that voice when we're quiet and we're centered. And 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 that's important to remember. It's very important to remember is to keep ourselves in a quiet and centered space. And there are lots of different ways to do that. But if you're busy running around and just ignoring with the TV on and the radio on, or trying to get all the kids together for supper or whatever you're trying to do, and you may not hear that voice because you need to be quiet.
People think it's like, well, people will say, but I don't have time for that, right? But it seems to me if you work, like it's that concept of, do you live your life just in beta, or do you, Penny Kelly talks about how these should be in a cycle. So we should have some time in beta and then some time in theta. And so there's the creation and the reflection on the creation and the correction, and then the state where you get downloads and whatever. So people may say, well, I don't have time to meditate or sit quietly. However, I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, that if you take the time to do that, and it could be half an hour or an hour, right, a day, then the rest of your day is going to go smoother, because you're going to now be living not just in this material realm, but you're going to be living in the material realm with your other dimensions kind of participating, right? So it makes a lot more sense to live that way. So that 1 hour that you take can make the rest of what you want to accomplish that day actually go faster and smoother, right?
Right. And to have a meditative practice is a really good thing. I mean, I've done it for years, but it doesn't have to be. It becomes more a state of being once you learn how to quiet yourself and turn off that monkey mind, I call it. You can do it at will, and you don't have to spend a lot of time in it because you begin to live there. And one thing that will help you is just taking your eyes up. And it's not that you're looking to source or anything. It's just that it's that state of that position of your eyes, and that gets, there's a whole theory about eye movements in this, but you just take your eyes up, and that will help calm you.
Huh.
Yeah.
That's interesting. I've heard of something called brain spotting, which says something about, like, if you change if you look up or you change the angle at which you're looking at things, it makes a difference. Is that kind of what you're talking about?
I haven't heard that particular term. I've called it EMDR, and I forget what that stands for.
Oh,
But the
yeah,
yeah,
that's
the eye movements, and you look up and to the left. That's where I usually look to source, and up and to the right. And there's so many fascinating things about the human body and the eyes in particular. The most people, our eyes are very different. The left from the right. Most people have an essence eye, and they have their persona eye. In other words, your ego is one eye, and your divine essence is the other. And so it's very interesting when you look in people's eyes, and you look to the left and then look to the right, and you notice a difference. I don't know if
that's
you've
interesting.
ever
I guess,
tried that.
yeah, I mean, I'm thinking, like, I've sort of played with that, where if you're looking at someone, you kind of look at one of their eyes.
Usually.
Yeah, you
Yeah.
can't, it's hard to look at both, right?
Right. And you're usually drawn to their essence eye, which for most people is the left. Now, it varies somewhat if people are right-handed or left-handed. Um, and but you'll know. Well, the other thing too, when you speaking of eyes and the way you perceive, is to use your peripheral vision. To learn to use your peripheral vision, you can see sometimes more easily into the other dimensions, because if we focus too much on something, then sometimes it's harder to see. But if we have a softer focus, then we can actually see more. So it's a whole science of what happens with the eyes and perception. As a as a healer, it's good to. I've studied body language. I've studied many different modalities to help heal. And when I do a session, I always connect to source, and source will guide me. Well, you might want to use theta here, or you might want to use matrix energetics here, which is totally quantum mechanics. Matrix energetics is absolutely fascinating, and makes use of that principle that something could change in a heartbeat. It can change like that. So, but some people just might not believe in spontaneous healing, and so that we might need to look at that belief system first, because I've had people come to me walking on a cane and walk out and throw the cane away, and just different things that can happen once a person is open to receive.
Yeah. I think that's everything is subconscious belief. I mean, that is so significant. That's why the placebo effect, right? People think that they're taking a pill to make them better, even if it's nothing, a sugar pill, they will get better.
Right,
And that
absolutely.
goes right back to how we started, right? Like it's really about that in the majority of situations.
Absolutely, absolutely. It's that subconscious, there's a drawing that circulated the internet where this most people's subconscious is 90% or 95% of all of them, how they operate, and the conscious is only 5%. So the act of becoming more conscious is taking that subconscious and bringing it up here to where you're aware of it. So that, that's why we only use such a small portion of our brains.
Yeah.
Is because the subconscious is ruling the rest of it.
Yeah, and it is true. The subconscious runs us. It makes it runs our behavior, our choices. And so I think that's a really important part of healing, is to address the subconscious, right? And so one way that I've figured out how to do it is I've noticed that if I'm reactive to something, in other words, if something triggers me, that's a direct timeline right back to something in my subconscious, a trauma, a distorted belief. Trauma creates distorted beliefs, right? So that's one way I found what's in my subconscious, is by what triggers me, what I'm reactive to. And then in my way of doing it, and I'd like to know what you think, I just sit with that once I find it, and I feel that feeling that I tried not to feel back then during the trauma, and I just let it be here. And there's an initial resistance and fear because it's nasty, it's not pleasant. But I find if you just, it's almost like you're treating that as someone in front of you. You're just like, okay, I'm going to let you be here. I'm going to see it. I'm going to feel it. And once you sit in it, it doesn't seem to be as powerful. And then this is probably energy healing, but I don't know. But I just say then, okay, I'm going to let this go. Is it serving me? What's it doing to me? Okay, I feel it. I heal it. I surrender it. I let it go. And then what I do is I reprogram by putting another belief in there. And I think it's very important that you said the I am. I don't always do that, but I'm going to remember that and say I am, and then put the new belief in there. And so that's one way that I've figured out how to reprogram my own subconscious.
No, that's really good. And you want to always put the I am in there, because then you're calling upon source, pure source energy to reinforce what you're doing. And that in a little bit of a different package is what theta healing is all about. And you mentioned a couple other things there that are really crucial. And one of that is to feel your feelings.
Yeah.
Our feelings can be very uncomfortable. But there's a book that I looked, is one of my main reference books, Feelings Buried Alive Never Die. And because when we refuse to feel our feelings, they literally will get into our body and cause us problems. And if you look at some of the work of Louise Hay, Heal Thyself, which it's a good place to start, but but the book tells you, for instance, if we've not processed grief, it gets in the lungs.
Yeah.
You know, and and other, and if you have some kind of a weakness or a toxic condition in your body, then that's where these other toxins tend to go, because the frequencies match. And then we talk about frequencies just a little bit. Everything has a frequency, and if frequency, a vibration, if you will, and frequency is just how fast it's vibrating, like a pendulum or a swing. Everything has this ebb and flow, like the oceans. Absolutely everything does, and they go at different rates of speed. And so the vibration can be higher for higher speed or lower for lower speed. And we are constantly putting these vibrations out into the universe and attracting. So we're praying every minute, which is who we are and what we believe. And so that's one reason that I like frequency healing so much. And again, Grigory Grabovoi, he has books and books and books listed of what the frequencies are for all the organs and all the conditions, all the psychiatric conditions, you name it, he's got it in these books. And if you focus on these numbers, then in his book, that will normalize a condition. Then things begin to change. And you can do it with the mind. You can just do it by asking source, if you feel comfortable with your connection to source. What is the frequency? And I do that, and I get numbers that just pop in my head. But it takes some practice to do that. And it takes some concentration, some mental concentration, along with being in the heart space to really affect it. And we can also use machines, rife machines. Royal Rife came up with a machine that transmits these frequencies to people. And there's a Healy. His work has been it's been compacted and computerized to a sense today that what they call the spooky 2 is another instrument that I use often. And you can lay on the table and it will run the frequencies on you. And it measures your heart rate variability, and it like resonates, or it comes together, it finds a matching frequency, and it'll diagnose you. And at the same time that it diagnoses you, it gives you the frequency that will heal you. So I can put the modern day rife machine, which is a spooky 2, on people whether they're in front of me or whether they're at a distance, and run the healing frequencies on them continuously. And same kind of thing with the Healy device, which is it goes beyond rife machine, because Hulda Clark had also worked out some frequencies, and like I say, Grigory Grabovoi is working out frequencies. A lot of people have jumped on this bandwagon of working with frequencies once we realized that everything is a frequency.
Yeah.
And so now, in the Skio machines, so now we have these technical healing devices that are available as well. And being an engineer, I like playing with my technology too. So
Yeah, and I've got to imagine that's the future of medicine, is this frequency healing. And I've come across these solfeggio frequencies, right? And they have different hertz, and like one is for your heart or for whatever. And when I use those, I mean, I can feel that it can change my mood. It can change my state of being.
mm-hmm.
And it made me think yesterday. Every few months, I just go in and I have this doctor, and he's studied as a chiropractor, but then he also studied Chinese medicine and applied kinesiology. Sorry, that word.
Kinesiology.
Yes. And cranial sacral and all that kind of, and acupuncture and all that. And they're all kind of variations of energy medicine. And so like when I went to see him yesterday, it was interesting because he'll muscle test also. So he'll put my arm up, and I had said to him something that was going on. And what he ended up figuring out is it's in your lungs, it's grief. And he did a series of things, and it ended up being, when I was born, my mother was put under general anesthesia. So she wasn't even there. And I felt abandoned and unloved. And then, the story of my life, that never changed, right? So he helped the physical symptom by going back to an emotional trauma that I hadn't even been thinking of. And then he had me do exactly what you're saying. First, he had, the statement like, I'm loved. I think it was something like, I'm loved and I'm seen and I'm cared for. And my arm would just go down because that wasn't my subconscious belief. And then he had me replace it with the positive statement. And it's kind of crazy. But then at some point after, and then he tapped, I think he did neuro emotional technique. And then in the end, he tested it again and my arm didn't go down. So I had absorbed the new belief. It seems kind of magical, but so that's the kind of doctor I see as the future doctors are going to be, because it involves everything. So the physical thing had an emotional component and had a belief component, and it's all mixed in together, isn't it?
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, and the magic of sound healing. I'm also a certified sound healer. I love my tuning forks, and we use the body tuners on the body, and the body creates nitric oxide, which is one of the best things that you can have for your body, in addition to reinforcing those natural frequencies that heal you on a very interesting level. Working with the tuning forks, it can come through somebody's field, and you find a place where the fork just begins to drag, and so you know that there's something in that spot in the field that's reflected to the body that that will come forth and reveal itself as that wants to be healed. Yeah.
Yeah, that reminds me of that. I think it's called cymatics, or where, I've seen people put sand or powder on a tray and then play frequencies to it, and it forms patterns just
Right.
from the sound, right?
Right. Right.
And that is kind of like the work of Emoto with water, where
Mm-hmm.
playing certain frequencies or even words, which are frequencies, right? To
Right.
the water, then freezing the water and then looking at the crystals. And depending on, if it was classical music, a beautiful crystal. If it was acid rock, a distorted crystal, right? So
Uh-huh.
that is so significant because, well, we're made of mostly water. And so sound and vibration and frequency, even what we think, can
Oh
influence the
yeah.
way that our body and our cells are, whether they're in health or not. So, I mean, that's huge. So that boils it down to watch what you're thinking about yourself, right?
Absolutely, because your body listens to you. It believes what you tell it.
Yes.
If you say I'm sick, your body is like, okay, I guess I'm not feeling well. Um, your thoughts are primarily the frequency that you're sending out. Absolutely.
Yeah. So that's a huge component of it in terms of, I call it mental hygiene, right? Like we take a shower and brush our teeth, but we let the mind run amok, right? And
Yeah.
it does
Yeah.
run amok. And then there are, because everything is frequency, the psychopaths that, want to harm us, they can run frequencies and make and create thoughts and jumble our thoughts and manipulate our thoughts, right? So that
Hmm.
goes back to your admonition to really connect with the heart, because the heart can't be manipulated,
Right.
can't lie.
Right.
So if the heart's connected to the mind's going to be operating the way it's supposed to, right?
Yeah, the heart is so powerful. It's like if you're in the heart, it's like hermetically sealed from everything that's going on around you, even from your own negative thoughts. If you stay in the heart, yeah, absolutely, it's a powerful place to be.
Yeah. And, even something as simple as like when you can tell when another person's in a bad mood, right? I mean, they
Sure.
don't have to say a word, but the energy is there, and you're like, ah. Or the same with myself when I'm in I've had days where I'm just in a terrible mood, and I'm frustrated or angry or whatever, and I feel it and I know it, and then what I do is I realize, like, I can't talk myself out of it, but I can frequency myself out of it. So I'll go online and I'll watch videos of cute little animals or babies laughing or whatever, or some moving story and then I start crying, and then it's like my vibration goes up, and in a second that bad mood is gone.
Right. Just find something that gives you joy. Absolutely.
So Marsha, as we wrap up, like, do you have any other things that you want to say about energy healing, or things that people can do for certain conditions, or like what advice would you give folks with the experience that you have?
Um, well, with my experience, I would say always connect to source, and make sure you're quiet when you do that, and additionally, connect to the earth.
Mm.
because the earth is our mother. And, there's a whole science around earthing and walking around barefoot or becoming a tree hugger, as they say.
Yeah,
Uh,
works actually. I've done that and it totally
well,
changed my mood.
yeah, it will totally change you. And so, uh, get some sunshine every day. And there's so many different modalities to study. But the thing is, even though I have studied many different modalities, I feel it's my toolbox, you know. And but source is the one that directs which tool to pick up. So a meditative practice, watching what you eat and drink, trying to stay centered, and if you get angry or out of sorts, then look at it. See it actually as a gift. If you see yourself getting triggered, oh, that's a gift. There's something in my subconscious that wants to be healed. What is it? Take a look at it. Feel your feelings. If you need to cry, cry. If you need to scream, you have to be careful not to scream at people you love, but you can always go out in the woods somewhere and scream or
In your car.
take up kickboxing.
That's what I do. I think car screaming is a is a technique that I use because I mean,
Uh,
yeah, people may look in and think you're a mad woman because your mouth is open and but when you're in your car by yourself, you can scream out all your frustrations, and if it's at someone, I draw a bubble around me so that it's my sacred space where I can release those frustrations so it doesn't go to the other person. And because I think what we feel and say about other people, it affects their energetic field,
Absolutely.
right? So I make sure I draw a bubble and then I let it all out so that then when I'm in front of them, I'm not tempted, because it is very tempting, right? To bah. So I think that's a car screaming. I highly recommend it.
And the other thing is don't be afraid to ask for help. I mean, I'm here for you. I find out that sometimes sometimes we can heal ourselves and sometimes not, because it is hardest for us to stay centered and objective. We have to be in that centered, objective space in order for healing to occur. And it's hardest of all for us to do that with ourselves. I'm not saying it's impossible, but it's more difficult. And it becomes difficult also with those who are close to us because we're emotionally attached. If you have fallen and broken your leg, and you feel that pain that you feel is going to overtake most of what you're feeling. Or if you feel like you might lose some of your loved ones, and those emotions that go with it can be very difficult to transcend. But that said, it's not impossible. But that's why there's people like me out there who can help you. It's easier.
Yeah. So, Marsha, why don't you tell us a little bit about what you do and how people can reach you? Because I totally agree. Generally speaking, we can and do heal ourselves, but there's so many things that are just too big and we're too down in that moment. It's like if
Mhm,
I just
mhm.
got run over by a car, I'm not going to really have the wherewithal to be able to be in that space to heal myself. So it's actually really good to reach out to whatever kind of healer. And then over time, I've taught people how to heal themselves after I've worked with them so they
Right.
can carry on from there. But it's really important to reach out for help. I totally agree. So if people want to do energy healing, how would they find you? And so just like give us your background here, how they can reach you.
Oh, sure. Well, I have a website that's marshawalters.com, and email, which I can also put maybe somewhere in the video. It's mlwaltersphd@gmail.com. But you can go right through my website, which is my name, which is easy to remember. And I typically do hour sessions for $150. And either distance, or if you want to come in person, you can do that too. But distance healing, since there really is no time and space and time, so distance healings work just as well. But sometimes it's nice for the personal touch.
Yeah.
And I don't limit what I do. I do work with absolutely anything because it's source doing the work, and source is unlimited. So it can be physical, emotional, spiritual, and I find a lot of people too are seeking spiritually, and that's important because it's an undeveloped thing for a lot of people because of religion primarily. It's religion is confusing. It sends you a lot of negative messages, and sometimes a lot of people tend to throw the baby out with the bathtub water, tend to throw Jesus out with Christianity, or throw God out altogether. And so it's important to have, that's why it's so important to have a direct relationship with the divine, above all else. Have a direct relationship with the divine. Just talk to him. Talk to source, talk to the universe, however you see that which ties us all together, brings us all together, the great hologram that is the universe that is within each and every one of us. Um, my my strongest advice would be to make friends and know that you're not being judged,
Yeah.
because you're not.
And all of us who came here and are healers, we're just conduits for that energy that you speak of, right? And
Right,
my
absolutely.
hope is that we will all heal ourselves, we will unite, we will heal the planet, we will heal all the evil that's taken root in many forms. And then, I mean, actually, my goal for the future would be to no longer be needed as a healer. So I look forward to that day when, we don't even need that anymore. But for now, it's, I think, the single most important thing. People say, well, how can I make a dent in this world and what's going on? Start with yourself, heal yourself,
Absolutely.
heal yourself.
Absolutely. Start with yourself. Love yourself, heal yourself, and everything else branches out from there, because the universe is within us. We're just holograms of the universe. So start here, start, and then work your way out into your neighborhood, your spheres of influence, and
Yeah, that's why we're here. So
yeah.
thank you so much, Marsha, for this conversation. I think that this is going to help a lot of people. And I look forward to talking with you next time about spirituality in general. You sort of alluded to it right now with the ways religion can sort of truncate that. And so next time, maybe we'll talk a little more about what true spirituality is. And so I always appreciate your wisdom and your calm, balanced demeanor, and the richness of your life experience. So thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you, Max, for having me. Love you.
Love you too.